On this week's episode of Life Planning 101, we're talking about something that separates those who succeed from those who stay stuck, and that's action. Because it's not what you know, it's what you do with it. In this episode, Dr. John Terry shares how belief, discipline, and daily decisions shape your future, especially when it comes to your life and your finances. If you've been putting things off, this is your wake-up call. Let's dive in. Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas. Tune in every week as we share important information to help you and your family live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, legacy and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Well, welcome everybody. We have a very special guest. I had the opportunity to meet him just a few weeks ago. I was at a conference and he was the keynote speaker. And, after hearing him, was very inspired by his message, and I felt it could be very inspiring to those of you. He's spoken around the country. He's written a number of books, and he went, at an early age from being bullied to being a 3-time Martial Arts Hall of Fame inductee. And now he's teaching the principles that he's learned and teaching those to help people with leadership skills and just everyday life, helping people to make the right decisions and having confidence. So it's Dr. John Terry. And Dr. John, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us and sharing with us today.
I am so glad to be in the room, Jim. Thank you for the invitation.
Hey, it's been a great journey, and hearing you speak and hearing about your journey was very inspirational. And I know you've written a lot of these books. Before I get into some of the questions about the books and some of the principles, how do you get from where you started to being a coach and to being an author and inspiring people? What made you get into that?
Jim, growing up as a child, my dad was a pastor. And so watching my dad's passion for people and wanting to help them see success in life really inspired me from an early age to be someone that saw value in people and looked for an opportunity to add value to them. And then over the years, just opportunity after opportunity, the doors kept opening for me to have the privilege to be able to speak into people's life and point them in a direction and help them see things they couldn't see so they could overcome struggles, obstacles, roadblocks in their way and experience more success in life as they learn how to lead themselves well and make good choices. So that's really how I got to where I am today.
Now, I know there's probably a lot of people out there. I know in visiting with countless people in my profession, there's always that self-doubt. And I would guess as a kid being bullied, you had a lot of self-doubt. Was there something that got you to where you realized that you could be who you are now? Or was there someone that mentored you to create that change? Because I think back when I was in grade school and high school, it's like I never had that inspiration that I was going to be, something special. Everybody talks about go to college, get your degree, get your job. What helped you transpire?
Jim, I had a couple of really good parents who continually spoke into my life and told me that I could do anything I wanted to do, be any person I wanted to be, but it was up to me to learn to develop that individual. And then as a result of bullying, my dad introduced me to the martial arts. And when I got into the martial arts, I realized that there was an opportunity to discover something inside of me that was not just somebody that wanted to walk around being scared and afraid the rest of my life. I realized that I could have confidence, that I could have the opportunity to step into a place in my life that I knew who I was, what I believed in, and what I had been called and put on this earth to do. And as a result of that, through now 50 years of being exposed to the martial arts and my mom and dad in their 80s still speaking into my life and some incredible individuals like Dr. John Maxwell, who also are privileged to speak into my life, I've discovered that the only really limitations we have are the limitations we place on ourselves. And as we learn to lift the lid of those limitations, be willing to step into that uncomfortable place where growth happens, we discover that all of us can say, do, and become more if we choose to do so.
Well, you wrote the book Black Belt Leadership 101, and you got 10 essential character qualities of black belt leaders. Which of these, in your opinion, is the most important?
Jim, that's a question I get asked often, and it's always the same answer. It's the first level. It's belief. You can't achieve what you don't believe. That's the premise of that chapter in the book, Black Belt Leadership 101, and it's true. Again, the limitations we put on ourselves are when we tell ourselves, I can't do that. One of the mentors in my life, Chris Robinson, has a great quote, and I use it often, and he uses it on me every time I see him. He says, John, it's not that you can't, it's that you won't, and that choice is yours. And every single one of us every day have a list of I can'ts that are really I wants because I choose not to do that. I choose to not eat healthy food because I love McDonald's. I choose not to go on a walk because I'd rather sit home and watch TV. We make those choices every day, and the choices we make determine the outcomes we're going to experience in life. But when we believe that we can achieve something, we can achieve a weight loss goal, we can achieve a financial goal, we can retire early, we can help send our kids or grandkids to college or help our children buy the home of their dreams, whatever it is that we aspire to do, we've got to first believe it, because what we believe drives the thoughts that brings that action to pass.
Well, I know I've seen so many times, how important it is for accountability. And when it comes to ourselves, we let ourselves off the hook with a million excuses all the time. And it's so easy to not succeed because it takes work. It's not automatic. It's not a magic wand, is it?
No, I mean, you can't wish your way to success. You can't wish your way to becoming an excellent version of who you are and what you do. You can't wish your way into financial wealth. There's action that's required. But it starts with believing that that's a possibility in your life. And until you believe it's a possibility in your life, you're never going to take the action steps necessary to achieve that goal or that dream or that aspiration.
I do a lot of retirement planning for people, and one of the studies that I've seen or surveys that it just makes me shake my head is when one of the top answers of how people are going to be able to retire is win the lottery, and it's like, and it's because they don't want to make the sacrifices, which means instead of just spend now, maybe spend a little less now and put a little bit away for later, that's a sacrifice. Or if we have a job where we're barely making ends meet, maybe we need to get that second job or take the overtime shifts, but that's difficult. So a lot of times it's easier to blame, the job market is bad. I can't, my wages, the boss is against me and all these different things versus being the best version of ourselves, being the best we can be, and take the time to have a plan, because I see so many people just wandering aimlessly in life where they make excuses not to have a plan so they don't have to keep themselves accountable and they can explain away everything.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to point the finger at somebody else than it is to point the finger back at the person that stares back at us in the mirror every morning when we're getting up and getting ready to start our day. But I remember Harry Truman had a sign on his desk and it said, "The buck stops here." And when you take personal responsibility for your actions, that's step one to learning, growing, and improving. Because until you admit you got a problem and you're spending more than you're making, or you're not saving what you should be saving to get to the financial goal you want, until you admit that's a problem, you're not going to take the steps to correct the problem. And until you correct the problem, if you do the same thing you've always done, you're going to get the same thing you've always got. And if you keep saying, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, well, guess what? Tomorrow never comes. And every day you fail to save is a day that your money doesn't have an opportunity to work for you. Jim, growing up, my dad gave me a reminder of the power of money early on. As he told me when I was about 12 or 13 years old, he said, "John, think of money as an employee. And your job as the employer is to give your money a job so that it's going to do something for you." And I said, "What do you mean?" So he began to teach me about investing. He began to teach me about starting a business. And I started a lawn mowing business when I was 13. And I literally owned the community that I lived in and mowed lawns all over town at 13. But it was because I learned the value of putting my money to work so that my money could give me a return and bring the profit that I needed to succeed in life. But how often do we sit around and say, well, I'll put money in a 401k tomorrow. I'll start that IRA next week. I'll do that Roth IRA a year or two. I've still got plenty of time. Well, every day is one unique day we'll never live again. So the best day to start saving was yesterday. The second best day is today.
Yeah, and it's the time value of money. I always tell people it's not so much how much you put away, but when you start, that is going to be the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, it reminded me of Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And one of his principles is you make your money work for you. And until you have your money working for you, you use your wages to buy what you need and your earnings off your investments to buy your wants. So you need to sacrifice until your money's working for you to give you those better things.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Albert Einstein said, the eighth wonder of the world was compound interest. And when we're young, compound interest is a significant ally that we oftentimes don't get in our corner. And when we're trying to fight the fight of saving for the future and we don't have compound interest working for us, we're missing a great opportunity to get that knockout punch that lets us retire extremely successful. And it reminds me of a study done by Real Life Management that they found, when I started working with financial advisors in the mid 1980s, Tom Wolfe had done a study and said 90% of people will retire and die broke. Well, Real Life Management revisited that study a few years ago, and they found that 85% of Americans are going to retire and die broke. So in 40 years, we've improved that percentage by 5% because it's human nature to procrastinate and put off to tomorrow what you should be doing today. And as a result of that, people aren't living the financial life they could live and experiencing the financial joy and freedom they could because they're choosing to put off to tomorrow what they should be doing today.
Absolutely. And then you look at the fact that years ago, most companies, at least the bigger companies, offered pension plans.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what you were saying earlier reminded me of a saying, if it's to be, it's up to me. Well, right now, it's totally up to you.
You're absolutely
to put
right.
away for
Yes.
your future.
Yep.
So, you're currently, I know, on a 12-city road show, and you're sharing your insights from your new book, Black Belt Secrets of Success. And at the events, you state we must all climb our own Mount Everest to achieve a high level of success and significance. What's required to do that?
Jim, there's 5 camps that you have to visit on your way up Mount Everest. I learned this from Sir Edmund Hillary Jr., who several years ago was retracing his dad's steps to summit Mount Everest. And I thought you just climbed to the top of the mountain. But there are 5 camps you have to visit to be successful. The first is passion. You got to figure out what it is you want to do and why it's important to you. Secondly, there's persistence. Once you know what you want to accomplish, what you want to achieve, you got to put in the hard work. The third camp is the price. There is a price to pay, and we've talked about it up to this point. If you want to have money tomorrow, you can't spend it all today. You can't spend the same dollars twice. And if you want to have money tomorrow, you got to pay the price to invest for your future success. Camp number 4 is pleasure. There has to be fun along the way, and you have to see the benefits of what you're doing. So if you're saving for a financial goal, if you're working on a weight loss goal, whatever your goal or objective is, you got to celebrate the wins along the way because that motivates you to keep going, because what you reward, you repeat. The last camp that you have to go through to get to the top of your Mount Everest is the purpose statement. And when you get to the purpose camp, it's that all-consuming why of how you want to be remembered. We all have dreams and aspirations when we're kids of what we want to be when we grow up. But as we get older, we start to think about, how do I want to be remembered when I'm gone? What are we teaching our kids and our grandkids about money and its role in their lives as a tool to help them be able to enjoy life to its fullest? What are we teaching our children? What are we teaching our grandchildren? And how do we want to be remembered? Those 5 camps, the passion, the persistence, the price, the pleasure, and the purpose of getting to the top are the 5 steps that you've got to do to get to the top of your Mount Everest and have the opportunity to stay there.
That's awesome. And, despite our country and all the problems that we hear on the news every day, at the end of the day, we have the freedom to make choices here, and we can choose to be a success and look for ways to be a success, or we can just make excuses and never realize that potential. Now, one thing is in your book, Leading Every Day, you talk a lot about the importance of consistency. And I know a lot of people, they might listen to you and say, I'm going to try this. And they do it once or do it twice. They don't get the automatic, immediate results. And I know it's persistent consistency that helps people break through and succeed. Why is that so important and so hard to do?
Jim, it's hard to do because we're human people. And human beings by design are designed to be creatures of habit. Our brain creates habits. And if we think about what we do every day, up to 95% of our day, we do without conscious thought. We get up and we go through the same routine every morning when we get dressed. We do the same basic routine at work. We drive the same place to go back and forth to work to buy groceries. And we really don't pay attention to what's going on in the world around us. But in order to be successful long term, what I talk about in that book that you just referenced is the fact of consistency. If you're persistent, you're going to get something. But when you're consistent, you're going to keep it. One of the things I say often, and you heard me say it when I was with you guys in Nashville, Jim, successful people do daily what unsuccessful people do sometimes or not at all. And if you look at the great athletes of the world, you look at the great performers of the world, the singers, the dancers, the incredible artists, they daily work on getting better at who they are and what they do, and they don't settle for yesterday's win. If I go run a 100-yard dash and I get a gold medal, fantastic. Well, I was successful yesterday. But if I want to be successful today and I want to keep the competition back and I want to be the best in the world, I've got to keep honing and training and becoming better at who I am and what I do. Ray Kroc, the founder of the McDonald's franchise, has an incredible saying that I love. And he says this, he says, as long as you're green, you're growing. But once you're ripe, you start to rot. And when we're learning and growing and focusing daily on getting a little bit better in some area of our life, we're staying green. But once we say, I've learned it all, I've done it all, there's nothing else for me to do, and we settle for less, at that point, we start to become rotten in our thinking and rotten in our doing, and we stop moving forward. And oftentimes, we don't just quit moving forward, we start moving backwards.
I know most people have heard the story of Colonel Sanders with Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, that guy, talk about consistency and persistency. He didn't make that a great success till he was at an age where most people are retired already.
That's right.
I've also heard the 10,000 hour rule. If you want to be an expert at something, you got to invest 10,000 hours into it to get there. And I've read a story about the Beatles. They practiced for over 10,000 hours before they went on tour at all these local pubs in the Liverpool area. And they were getting every gig they could to hone their craft to get them ready to go on tour. So, my grandma always told me anything worth doing is worth doing well. So those are important lessons, and it's not easy. But then, once you start implementing that, the habit becomes easy, doesn't it?
That's correct. Excellence is the result of doing something over and over again with the purpose of getting better at doing it each time you do it. Now, that could be basketball, that could be fishing, that could be cooking, whatever it is that you want to become an expert at, you've got to be willing to put in the time. Again, going back to that price to pay and being persistent, it's all part of success in life. And I think back to you talking about the 10,000 hours. I just finished an incredible book called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Holmes. And in that book, he says it takes 10,000 hours to become a subject matter expert. But then he goes on to say it takes another 10,000 hours to become a master at that art, profession, trade, or craft. So to become a subject matter expert, 10,000 hours. And if you look at the Beatles, you look at some of the great rock bands, they put in the 10,000 hours, but every time they're on tour doing a set on stage, they're practicing again, even as they're performing. And over time, they get better and better and better and better until in the martial arts, there's a concept called Mushin, which means no mind. You become so masterful at that skill that you don't even have to think. You just do it because it becomes a part of who you are. And that's what excellence is. It's practicing to the point that excellence becomes a part of who you are in everything you do, and you just live it out every single day.
Yeah, I know you hear a lot of football players talk about that when they leave college and go to the NFL. They talk about, that they're a step behind because they're always thinking about what they need to do.
Yes,
And it usually takes a couple of years before they become instinctive and then they become dominant.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I have a good friend who went to try out for the Cowboys several years ago, and he said, John, I got down in my stance, and when they snapped the ball, by the time I thought to get up, he said these big 300-pound athletes were 5 yards down the field, and he said I was one of the fastest guys in college as a linebacker, and he said it took a while for me to adapt and adjust to this higher level of thinking.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. Well, let's wrap up with going back to your first book, Dollars and Cents, which was a financial book. And I think we touched a little bit on this, but let's expand on it a little bit. What does leadership have to do with money, or does it?
Leadership has everything to do with money, because if you're not leading your money and telling your money where to go, when to go, in what amount to go in a certain area, your money is controlling you. And so when it comes to being financially successful in life, you've got to be the one calling the shots, and you've got to be the one in control. That means you've got to lead your money, just as you would take a child and you tell a child growing up, I want you to go here and I want you to do this. If you want to be financially successful, you've got to treat your money the same way. Money needs to know what you want it to do, when you want it to do it, and the outcome it needs to achieve. And you've got to send that money on a mission, give it a job for it to deliver the financial results that you want to experience in life.
I think a very small percentage of people that are successful doing it on their own. And it's just about anything. And no matter what you do, you look at the great quarterbacks and the great NBA players and all that. Most of them have a coach, and that coach is maybe not as good on the court as they are, but that coach is what keeps them accountable and keeps them doing the right things and doing them consistently. And I think the same thing happens when it comes to your finances. People get way too emotional about their money, and it's too easy for them to lie to themselves that this is okay just this one time, or it can wait till later, and all the other excuses that we talked about. And I think anybody that wants to achieve financial success, you need an accountability coach that is not emotional about your situation the way you and your family might be, to help guide you and make those critical decisions. So if you aren't taking advantage of the coach you're working with now, you need to give them a call and say, hey, am I on track? What do I need to do? And make sure you're sticking to a plan. What would your advice be?
Jim, I 100% agree. As you were talking, my mind went back to Tom Landry. And growing up as a child, I admired Tom Landry. In fact, I've got a letter that Tom wrote me when, as a 7, 8-year-old kid, I wrote him a letter and told him I wanted to be a Dallas Cowboy when I grew up. But one of the things Tom Landry said about coaching, I think is important. He said, a coach will tell you what you don't want to hear. A coach will have you do what you don't want to do so that you can become the person that you're capable of becoming. And when it comes to finances, why not work with somebody that can see what you can't? Why not work with somebody that can help you do what you need to do that maybe you don't know you need to do, or you're hesitant to do? And they're going to tell you the things you don't want to hear because they're emotionally disconnected. Having a coach, and I'll tell you this as a side note, the most successful people in the world have a bunch of coaches around them that give them guidance and advice, because all of us are smarter than just a single one of us. So leaning into people that are subject matter experts that can get the results you want is how successful people become more successful. So if the people listening to this podcast don't have a financial coach, Jim, I'd encourage them to reach out and at least give you a call and have a conversation about what you can do, where they're at, where they want to go, just to see if what they're doing is working. Oftentimes they think they're on a journey to, a destiny that they want, to find out they detoured and they're going to a place they don't want to go. But it's important they have a conversation with someone that can say, yeah, what you're doing is working, keep doing it, or maybe if we did it this way and we change this, you're going to get a better outcome. Or maybe it's that person that you get to say, hey, you're on a road to nowhere. And if you don't stop, you're going to get there. I'd like to get you to the road to somewhere, and that's financial independence. Let's have a conversation. But that's not going to happen if they don't open up and they're not willing to say, can you help me?
I just have a couple reactive comments to what you all said. One is 1 + 1 in my book equals 11. You know, the power of compounding when you combine using other people as resources versus trying to do it all yourself. You just can't be an expert in everything. And delegating what you're not an expert to an expert, usually you're going to get a much better result. And the other thing I was thinking about while you're talking is I've had Robert Kiyosaki as a guest a number of times in the past. And one of the first times I had him on as a guest, he said to me, he said, Jim, I can't believe you're interviewing me. Financial advisors don't like me. And I said, what do you mean financial advisors don't like you? And he said, well, they all, I teach people how to do a lot of this stuff themselves. And I said, yeah, you're teaching people how to invest and how to, become financially independent. But you also say in your book, unless you're dedicating at least 10 hours a week to, researching any particular investment that you might be considering or investing in, if you're not doing that, you should have an expert. And you talked about how you had experts. My client and most financial advisor clients are not do-it-yourselfers. They're people that value advice and value that expertise. And so I've always been about collaboration. I've always been, the importance of having mentors, having coaches has made a world of difference in my own life, not to mention the lives of others that I come across that have helped mentor me into actually even considering getting coaches. And it's making an investment in yourself. So I'd like to finish with one more time, Terry, how do people get a hold of you and how do they engage in your services?
Absolutely. Jim, the easiest way to get me is to go to my website, beablackbeltleader.com. beablackbeltleader.com.
All right. Again, I appreciate you being on and hope to have you on again sometime soon.
Love to come on anytime, sir. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. If you have questions, you can email them to lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more Life Planning 101. The opinions expressed herein are those of the firm and are subject to change without notice. The opinions referenced are as of the date of publication and are subject to change due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of the author, may differ from the views or opinions expressed by other areas of the firm, and are only for general informational purposes as of the date indicated. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Smart Money Group LLC. Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group LLC are separate entities and are not owned or controlled by Calton & Associates Incorporated.